Hello, and welcome to another video. This is technically a guide, but we'll be covering both the basics and more in-depth things about the spec. Immediately going into it, I want to cover stats and why I run 5% accuracy on lethality. One of the main damaging abilities is Toxic Blast, which is white damage. I'll show you guys the tooltip for that right now, real quick, as I go over it. Missing this before using Toxic Haze to spread it is rather big for damage loss. Along with that, having all three dots on the target really ramps up your damage with Corrosive Assault. So even if you're not able or about to haze, it's a good ability to up your damage. It will also give you a tactical advantage, and if you put it on someone before they die, it'll reset the cooldown. Anyway, back to stats. A good portion of your damage is basically just white damage, so accuracy is really good for lethality. I wouldn't recommend more than 5%, but I highly recommend it. I also run 4 alacrity pieces, and then the way I get my accuracy is just from running 2 accuracy pieces, and then the rest is critical, with all critical augs. Luckily enough, I run this on most of my other builds too that do white damage, not just out of laziness, but because our stat pool is so low, we don't really have much of an option, so I definitely recommend this setup for lethality by far. Now, getting into part of gearing is implants and tacticals. I run 10% critical tactical advantage gain, or 10% on tactical advantage gain, which is this one right here, Tactician's Package. There we go. Sorry. This one is very good. I highly recommend it. This really helps with the crit loss that we have this expansion. Definitely recommend this without a doubt. Then we have an optional 5% increased damage or healing on Toxic Haze. So this one is just basically free damage. It's pretty good. I use it. Then you also have this one, Toxic Haze Heal. This is really nice. And then you can mention this one. However, this one's so-so. It's not bad. It's not amazing. You can run it if you want to. I don't really run it anymore. Mostly because this one used to be bugged, and I didn't have this one up yet, so I ran this one for a little bit. So getting into Toxic Haze and why I mention it, a good way to use this ability is you can put your haze down a bit more without having to care as much about spreading, as it will heal you if you need healing. It also allows for area denial. If you're lining a target, you either get a free heal while you're line of sighting, or they push and you get a free lethal haze on them. It's a win-win when you can do that. Otherwise, it's just nice healing support to the team when you're off healing, and it's just pretty good. Lastly, for this part covering tacticals, pretty much every situation you'll run viral elements. Even if you're single targeting, this is still good damage. For example, you'll do the initial damage from it, and then the AoE version will also hit them too. So it's good for single target. And then if you're not going to use this and you're just purely single targeting Synox shots, I believe that's how you say it. Synox? Something like that. This is a good single target tactical. It's not terrible, but you pretty much need perfect uptime to make the full use of the extra energy, or you have to be off healing a lot while also single targeting. This will definitely help your energy management when you're healing a lot and you're finding yourself running into energy management problems and you're not able to make use of fire elements. So there are some cases that you can use this. And then lastly, you can use overwhelming offense. It's a good option, but pretty much anytime that you can use some viral elements, I would recommend it over the other two. Now we'll jump into defensives and what order we should be using things. So we're going to start with some information over here. So basically, your periodic damaging effects don't tick. So this is basically just like so you can mess somebody when they have dots on, right? you always take 30% reduced damage from periodic effects. So this is basically .dr, Pyro Attack, and Lethality are the only ones with this, I think. I think Virulence also has this. So my apologies. And your damage reduction is increased by 15% for 6 seconds after Shield Probe ends. So Shield Probe is also something that synergizes with this. So Shield Probe heals you 5% of your maximum health when it collapses. Since our health is really high, this is actually pretty good. So that's the number one thing that you always want to think about. Shield Probe, 30-second cooldown, absorbs a decent amount of damage, gives you a 5% heal, and has 15% DR. This is always the number one ability that you want to be rolling off just instantly. Think of it like as like a Cloak of Pain. So for example, you're always using Cloak of Pain anytime that you're getting attacked. So pretty much anytime that you're getting attacked on Lethality Operative, Absorb should be something that you're paying attention to, that you're using. It is the way that you'll get your main DR and then how you'll have the highest DR uptime possible and not take as much damage, because yes, you do have self-healing, but if you're taking just too much damage, that self-healing is just not going to work. So part of the way the kit works to its fullest is having good DR uptime and DCD management, and then complementing that with self-heals. So if you're not good at using your DR, which Absorb will be like your main source most of the time, outside of Stim Boost, you're pretty much going to just take too much damage. And especially if you make it easier for yourself to get hit, it's going to be a lot worse. This class does pretty much have all the tools it needs to make itself not easy to hit. Then we'll go into Stim Boost. This is a offensive, well actually you can't see that tooltip, so I'll bring it up here. This is an offensive, but also defensive at the same time. So for example, this will give you a tactical advantage, it'll give you 10 energy, nobody cares too much about that really. And then it'll boost your alacrity for 10%. That's super nice. This also scales with alacrity, by the way, so you can get some value. So this lasts for 20 seconds, and granting revitalizers, which restores 5% total health every 3 seconds, and reduces damage received by 20%. Does not break stealth. That's really good. And you also have a thing here, says if gross assault, blah blah blah. We don't really care about that, but at the end you see here, this effect can, well, again, sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. Stim Boost lasts 5 seconds longer, but basically that's the most important thing that you're taking from this. So having a longer duration on Stim Boost does mean that you get a longer duration of the percent healing, a longer duration of revitalizers. It's just overall really good. So if I do this, and then I go to Stim Boost, it tells you it's only 15 seconds. Terrible. So anytime that you're playing PvP, you always take this talent, because this increases the duration of Stim Boost and the total healing that you can get from Stim Boost. I do think the self-healing of Stim Boost should be nerfed. But this is very good. 100% make sure you're taking this talent. If you're not taking this talent, you're kind of throwing. Now moving on from Stim Boost, you should basically understand that that's your main defensive. That's like the one that you'll pop, and sometimes you'll even pop it with Absorb. Those two going, your damage reduction is very, very high. And going on to third ability, you can use this one differently. It really just depends on the situation. We're going to Evasion. So let's just cover a couple things for Evasion. Lethality lasts for an extra second, increases the duration of evasion by 2 seconds if you decide to take this one. So you can have a 6-second evasion, and then you can also tie Reflect with that. So 6 seconds of evasion, sorry. Then also having Reflect on. This right here is not what you would usually take, but it's pretty fun to mess with. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes people don't expect 6 seconds of Reflect evasion. However, this does make you a little bit more vulnerable. So if you're just trying to get damage and you're not at much threat of probably dying, this is probably pretty good to just mess with. Obviously, you're giving up your heart stun to do that, so maybe not worth it in the long run. But it is kind of fun sometimes to mess with. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I've tried it. I've had fun with it. For the most part, I just pretty much always prefer the evasion CDR because it's just so much better. Your evasion uptime is so much better, and giving up your hard stun for this is only sometimes worth it. Most of the time, I want my hard stun, unless somebody else is able to constantly just CC. In that situation, I'd probably play like double power deck or something. They're probably going to CC your target all the time. So maybe like in regs, you don't really need it as much, but you can never go wrong with a hard stun in regs. So overall, evasion is interesting. So getting into what it actually does, so you can see here, it gives 200% dodge chance. This is for white abilities. This doesn't make you immune to yellow at all. And if you do get CC'd, do remember, while you're CC'd, you have 0 chance to dodge anything. Any defense chance, anything like that, does not work when you're stunned. So if somebody CC's you while you have evasion up, you will not dodge anything. The reflect will still work while you're stunned, but you will not dodge anything if you're stunned during evasion. So just keep that in mind. It's not like be-all, end-all defensive. It's something that you have to be very aware about and understand when to use it and not to use it when you're about to get stunned, because it's not going to do anything if you're stunned. Now we're going to go into something briefly. Actually, I guess we can just do it here first. Just right here. While rolling, your chance to dodge melee and range attacks is increased with 3% and does not break stealth, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about the rest of that stuff. But this is the main thing and why I include this. 30% defense chance isn't that bad. You throw a predation in there, you're at 40% defense chance right there, just from using these two things together. This gives you a relatively high chance to dodge something, and hold on. I will show you here regular base defense chance. We have 5. So you would reach all the way to 45% defense chance. And let's say they're not taking accuracy and they get tank debuffed. They're going to have somewhere around 50-something% chance to miss on you. That's an incredibly high chance for them to miss on you. So sometimes rolling even on lethality against white damage users with predation is going to be extremely worthwhile because your chances to miss or make them miss is pretty damn high. Now getting into the main thing for why you want to roll is increase, well, that's your evasion thing, we don't care about that. So when you activate roll, you gain quickening, which makes your next Culto Infusion activate instantly and costs no energy, and does not require or consume a tactical advantage. This effect can only happen every 10 seconds. So the way to think of it is that whenever you have this come back off of cooldown, do note, actually you can even see it that well, my bad. We'll do right here. See how its cooldown is 9 seconds? I have no alacrity right now. On top of that, I also am not, well, since I don't have any alacrity, I'm also not using any alacrity boosting, so it can be even shorter on cooldown. So the way to think of how to constantly use this without any downtime or any wasted GCDs is to basically wait 2 to 3 seconds. 3 seconds if you're on stim boost, 2 seconds if you're on just non-stim boost. But typically 2 GCDs after it comes back up. So when it comes back up and it's available again, 2 GCDs afterwards, then you'll be able to roll and get another instant. So just think of it that way, 2 GCDs afterwards. Always that way, otherwise you're rolling a little bit too early and you're not getting the proc, so therefore you have to roll again. So you're wasting a GCD. Do not do that, just try to remember 2 GCDs after using, or after it's, come up. And that's only if you're trying to use it every single time off cooldown. If you're not using off cooldown, you can just roll. Because if you're trying to make a tracker for the internal 10 seconds, just remember 2 seconds, but 2 GCDs after last using it. Or not last using it, but as it comes off cooldown, sorry. My brain is completely scattered trying to explain that. It's really not that complicated. It sounds complicated. It's not. And then also as a part of roll, when you, how to put it, when you roll off something, so for example, I can show you right here, I don't have a weapon, so I can't roll, but if I was to roll right here, I would get an extended roll because I would roll off here. So instead of like landing like right here, because I'm falling, if I rolled like right here, I would roll here, and then I would roll, and I would probably land somewhere like right here. This is further distance than what you would actually get with a just normal roll. So if I rolled, I'd go like here to like here, and that'd be the furthest. So you see how much more distance I got here? So it'd be like here, distance. It's like almost like another roll. So keep that in mind. You can extend your roll, and I highly recommend learning how to do that and making use of that because it'll help you a lot. Then going on to Corrosive Grenade. This is obviously the first thing that you'll use if you're running the DR talent. This will be number 1, but still the order that I'm giving you guys is still pretty important. So there's like really no downside of opening up his orb unless you absolutely know that you need to keep it. It's good to just have damage reduction rolling, especially with such a low cooldown, to prevent you from taking that much damage, therefore less threat of dying, less threat of needing healing and support and stuff like that. So you have to think about it proactively and not like after the fact, you know? Because if you lose a whole bunch of health and you suddenly have to start playing defensively, your pressure is basically nothing. So you need to basically maintain healthiness, I guess, that would be the word, to continue pressuring. And if you're not doing that, this class is just, it's not going to be that great because when somebody turns on you, throws a TD and an energy burst on you, you're probably going to lose most of your health. But let's say you have stim boost and Absorb going because they're such low cooldowns and they help your DPS, but also just help your survivability. That TD energy burst isn't going to hurt that much. And on top of that, you already got healing rolling from 1, the absorb, and 2, the stim boost. So you'll be able to recover a lot faster in that situation. So if you're ever in like potential to take damage, it is good to always start with these. And going to Corrosive Grenade, if you're in the DR talent, which sometimes it's definitely necessary, we have this. So this is just, how to put it, this is just silly. I'm just going to say that. So 2% damage reduction, lasts for 10 seconds, super easy to apply. It's only stacks to 8 players, but the cool thing is that it's not unique to the individual player that you hit it on. So you could hit the same 4 players twice and have max stacks. Max stacks being 8, for those that aren't too aware. Just because there's 4 players, it doesn't mean it maxes out at 4 players. It actually maxes out at 8 players, which would be theoretically the max for a Warzone. So even in Arena, this is really good. And you can stack it all on one person if you really need to, but usually you want to try to hit multiple targets with it so you can keep the DR. And then once you've got the max stacks, it's not too hard to upkeep, but it is something that you have to pay attention to because it will be very important. So overall, it's weird. Like I love taking this one a lot more because the crit is just more damage. More damage is great. Defensive power is not necessarily needed, but your raw defensive power with this is pretty crazy. If you're really bad at using your defensives and you're not great at operative, I highly recommend using this because this is a lot of extra free damage reduction. You can basically permanently keep this up if you're always in combat. I highly recommend trying it. It's a lot of fun. You can really limit test and self-heal and off-heal and stuff like that a lot better with it. So definitely check that out. And then lastly, we'll have probes. So while it's technically a heal, it is part of why you're so durable. So for example, let's go here and type probe. You'll find this. So this gives you X amount heal and no gear. So this is an accurate healing amount for 18 seconds. And it stacks up to 2 times. 18 seconds is a really long time for a hot. Like Resurgence is only like 6 seconds, I think. Or a little bit less. But I think it is about 6. So in comparison to Resurgence, just as an example, this is so much better. You can also put this on your allies, so this overall is just really good. Having 2 stacks when you're in trouble really ups your survivability. Your healing is leagues above other off-healing on other specs due to its DR availability and other healing tied to it. So much, I think, healing nerf is needed. That would be, again, nerfing stim boost self-healing through the percent healing. I think it's a little too high. but that's mostly probably because you can have stim boost for 20 seconds and then also have stim boost reset. Now, one thing to mention here that I didn't mention is tactical overdrive. This resets, I can spell. This resets your stim boost, also resets some of your offensive abilities and your shield probe, which is really important because this allows you to not only do a lot of damage, but also have defenses back once again. It's a very, very good ability. It's more so an offensive thing, but if you're in a really bad situation defensively, it is worth using. Better off not dying. Dying is not good sometimes. But if, sometimes in regs dying is necessary, and popping it just to survive for a couple more seconds isn't going to make a difference. So do make that judgment call yourself. And then we're going to move on to basic combos and what you should be doing to deal any sort of damage. Read viral elements. It's the first thing I want you to start with. So Toxic Haze spreads Toxic Blast, and Lethal Strike does additional damage to all nearby targets affected by Toxic Haze. Now, this doesn't mean the entire radius of Toxic Haze, and it also will hit, the AoE version will hit the main target. So you're hitting the main target basically with 3 hit splats, because it's 2 hit splats, the first initial, so you get the 1, and then you get the 2, and then the AoE version hits them, because Lethal Strike hits twice. Which I should just bring this up so you guys can see. So you see, it hits twice. So basically, in any situation, you always want to have Corrosive Grenade going first, because this will give you a critical buff to all the other dots that you will apply. So try to get Corrosive Grenade on a lot of players, or most of the players. Then use your Dart, and then use your Toxic Blast, and then use your not your Viral ones, but your Toxic Haze to then spread the Corrosive Dart and Toxic Blast. And then you have all 3 dots on target. And that pretty much makes any of those people that you just now have done that to viable for lethal hazing. So that's basically Lethal Strike during, while one of them is in the AoE of Toxic Haze. So even if somebody's on the edge of Toxic Haze and they have a lot of players right next to them, you can do that person that's still in it, and even if they, as you use it, walk out of it, it'll still work, and it will hit the people that are around them. It's AoE based off of the person that you hit that is still in Toxic Haze when you use it. So it's not based off of the radius of Toxic Haze, it's the radius around the person that you hit, which the radius isn't very big. So in any situation where there's Lethality Operative, you put Haze down, you don't have to get out of the Haze, because you already got hit by it. You just need to stay far enough away to not get hit by the AoE radius, which is not too hard because it's not too big. That's one thing I know a lot of people don't seem to know about it, but this is why I recommend if you're playing as Lethality Operative, just walk away from it. That's literally the best way to play against them. So basically going into the second part, applying Corrosive Dart, Toxic Blast to the target that's probably immobile, which I'll recommend Juggernaut and Mercenary as these targets, because they can't really purge anything. And close to someone you can spread to, obviously. You can even stun them if you need to, but be aware if it's the start of the game, people will break it most of the time. Getting all 3 dots in somebody's top priority, and getting Corrosive Dart and Toxic Blast before you spread is pretty much mandatory. Always keep that in mind. Then you'll Lethal Strike on the target after you haze. It will hit the initial target plus the AoE version, so it's still good single target. So if you ever do have to do that, it is 100% worth it. This is part of why it'll destroy tanks with Toxic Haze. Always hit into the guarded target with this ability. I see a lot of people trying to tank tunnel with it, and you're actually doing less damage doing it this way. You're much better off hitting into the tank, or not the tank, but the guarded target, because they'll take more number slots. And when you're doing damage to 2 players, it's much harder for somebody, especially as a healer, to deal with that kind of situation because they both take a lot of damage, right? And the tank will take reasonable amount more. Just like how pyro works, pyro will do majority damage to the tank because they're basically double dipping. Lethality does the same thing. And make sure that you have dots on the tank too, while you're also hitting the guard target. It's very, very important. So when Toxic Blast is on the target, along with other dots, Corrosive Assault will do a lot of damage. It'll take the dots as you hit with it. So, Corrosive, that's a O, or a 0. There we go. Alright. Executes your tactical advantage to fire a volley of corrosive shots, doing 0 weapon damage because I don't have a weapon, and causing your periodic poison effects on the target to also deal damage. This is a key factor here. So landing this ability, when you have all 3 dots on somebody, does a massive amount of damage. You do not even want to bother using this ability if you don't have all 3 dots on the target, or at least 2 dots on the target. If you have all 3, that's the ideal time to use this. Always keep this in mind. This is a really good ability. You need to know that you need all 3 dots on the target, and this is why accuracy is pretty much mandatory. So outside of that, most of the time you don't have too crazy of a filler. Like you can get Shiv and it'll give you a free crit for Corrosive Assault. That's great. So usually it lines up perfectly. So pretty much every time after you've done a spread, you're able to get at least 1 free crit Corrosive Assault on the target. Top of that, for AoE, you have Noxious Knives, which is pretty good to use at least once because it hits twice. So for example, do this, yeah, right here. So see how it hits once and then does internal poison damage. Internal damage is really good, very good at shredding tanks. When people are stacked, checking this out after you've done Toxic Haze, it's a little extra damage. You can use it more than once, but usually once or twice is the maximum that I would recommend. And then you start potentially looking at 1, energy problems, and 2, basically damage loss, basically energy. Then you also have something called Thermal Grenade, I believe it's called, or no, Grenade, Fragmentation Grenade. Okay, my bad. So this one is another good AoE, and the reason why is because it's got good range. The energy for it is very expensive, so be careful with spamming it off cooldown. And it deals, initial damage, and then it does a second splash of damage, right? So this is really nice. Really, really nice. Anything that hits more than once is just typically really good, especially in AoE situations. Then going into pretty much the last bit is, let's see if we can find that critical. Here it is. I think it's this one. Shiv triggers Fatality, which makes your next Corrosive Assault regrant tactical advantage and costs no energy. So that's not what I was looking for. Why can't my brain? I'm sorry. I should have found this beforehand because this would be much easier. Am I just crazy, or is it just like some other passive? Or did it, man? Maybe I'm just wrong, but I can't really. Yeah, okay, I can't blame myself. All right. So I guess it doesn't give you a crit. I swear it did. I guess I'm losing my mind. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. But either way, this is nice. So we've got that. So we get a free tactical advantage every 10 seconds when we use this. So it lines up pretty well. And then we also have this. So basically, we have another version of this. So we would proc this, and then we would also have this. So you can get like 4, I think it is. Corrosive Assaults in a row on somebody, and that's a lot of damage, especially when you have all 3 dots on them. So do keep that in mind. It's about every 10 seconds again that you'll want to do that. You'll be able to get 2 free ones. Overall, it's really, really just easy to play damage-wise. Knowing your damage combo is important. If you're in a situation you need to off-heal a lot, just get Toxic Haze off and your free crit Corrosive Assault from Shiv, which is, you know, probably not true. It's basically just a free Corrosive Assault. For some reason, I'm thinking of crit, and I think probably the only reason I'm even thinking of crit is because of this implant here, so I'm completely sorry about that. My brain is a little wild this morning. So after you get that off, obviously you spread and then you get that off. So it'd be like something like you would throw corrosive Denart. What is Denart? Corrosive dart, right? A corrosive grenade, or the start of corrosive grenade. So let's say there's a whole bunch of people here. You're trying to get corrosive grenade on everybody, and then you would dart, and then obviously you can hollow in. I like hollow. You can use flashbang, but in most regs I would probably recommend hollow locate, or it's hollow traverse. My bad. And that'll give you a free TA, and then you pop stim boost, and then Shiv. This would give fatality, so you'll have a free Corrosive Assault. And you can either hard stun, but just do remember, probably in the opener game somebody will probably break that and pop something because you hard stun them. So you can't get a Toxic Blast. It is a range ability just like your other dots. And then you put Toxic Haze. The best way to think about Toxic Haze is like, let's say somebody's kiting in this direction, right? They need to kite in that direction, because if they kite in the other direction, they're dead. You can move up a little bit further than them and put it down. So they have to walk through it. So that means a free Toxic Haze for you. Or, Lethal Strike, I guess, for you. That's very important. And focusing on learning how to use Toxic Haze is a very important tool. Always, as a melee, predict where your enemy has to kite or has to go. Because if you don't, you're not going to be as effective or as good at staying on target. So it's a very mandatory skill. You basically have to learn how to read minds, and if you're not very good at that, you'll struggle as a melee pretty much no matter what. So you would do that, get your dot spread, and then use your Corrosive Assault. When you have all 3 dots on the target, Corrosive Assault does a lot of damage. As I said before, I'll probably do a little demo maybe at the end. I'm not sure. We'll see. I wanted to keep the editing for this video relatively short. This video is already 32 minutes long. I've been talking this whole time. So this will be a pain for me to go back and edit the audio just a little bit, because I definitely make some mistakes, but it's whatever. I'll leave most of them in there because for the sake of making this easy. So we'll go into how to basically deal with healing and upkeeping probes on yourself and others. Damage is really important, so you basically always want to make sure that you get your Lethal Strike or your Toxic Haze spread off, and then anytime that you would probably use Shiv or Corrosive Assault, maybe spend that time as just getting the free one, and then just focus on Offhealing, and then when your probes are refreshed and you don't have Culto Infusion that you can throw out, just go back to Shiv and Corrosive Assault and just make sure your dots are up. So moving into healing, going into Offhealing, we have probes, right? Now you won't want to keep probes really on more than 2 to 3 targets max. That's energy management, but also it's a lot harder to do. Oftentimes, if you're not a target, which will be most of the time, keep probes on allies. That would be the priority. Oftentimes it's just 2 players, as they'll be the main targets taking damage. It's pretty easy to upkeep this, as duration is very long. In comparison to other HOTS like Resurgence, it will be important to try to keep your Lethal Strike on cooldown. And the reason why I say that is to get the passive of this. So we don't care about the increased damage poison effects, but well, that's the wrong one. This is the one we're looking for. Augmented Toxins. You get this after using Lethal Strike. This increases the critical multiplier of your damaging and healing periodic effects by 30% for 6 seconds. So this increases the damage of your dots, but also the healing of your Culto Probe. So this means a lot of extra healing. It's definitely mandatory if you want to do decent off healing and damage at the same time, is to make sure that you always get your toxic haze off, or your toxic haze into lethal strike, or even if you can't get toxic haze into lethal strike, just go ahead and use lethal strike single target for the crit bonus. It's definitely worth it. So moving on to, what's the other thing? Infusion. So it's no longer, we don't have creative agent anymore, so it's no longer getting a bonus from the lethal strike anymore. So this is just a flat heal. It's very good. Again, way to remember. So when it's coming off cooldown, once it's off cooldown, 2 GCDs afterwards, you can roll and get another instant. So just keep that in mind. It is sometimes worth hard casting, but if you can afford to get 2 more GCDs off before reusing it, definitely just do that instead, because then the roll will give you an instant cast. And it's just generally most of the time better. So just try to remember that 2 GCDs after it comes off cooldown. That's the way it works. It's a 10-second internal timer for getting the proc. You can get this down to, I believe, 8 seconds or even 7 seconds. So pretty much no matter what, you're going to be waiting about 2 to 3 GCDs at tops. And you should pretty much always use this anytime that you need to off heal somebody. Like if, let's say you're taking an off node together with somebody, throwing Culto Infusion on somebody is very important, or if you're like a solo ranked. This is massive. The amount of healing that you do with this ability alone can add up to some very high HPS games. On top of that, keeping probes up. Probes is relatively easy. Using Culto Infusion on cooldown is relatively easy. As I said, just follow the rule of when it comes off cooldown, use 2 GCDs, and then you can roll it, and you can use another one. And just love keeping your probes. You don't need to spam probes on people, just maintain them. So about every 7 GCDs is a good time to reprobe, just in case you get CC'd. So just think of it as just constantly micromanaging, like, hey, I've done this ability, I've done this ability. Just be hyper aware of what you're doing GCD wise, so you can maintain internal timers for Culto Infusion and keeping your probes up. This is a micromanagement healer, and you really have to keep track of things like that. I can't heal very well. I don't even bother trying. But medicine is definitely one of the more fun classes, I would say, for healing. I like the micromanagement to it. Definitely keeps my attention a little bit more, but I think I would probably not enjoy it, so I just don't really do it. I don't think there's probably anything that you can do in this game that would be more unfun or less enjoying than solo queuing as a healer in Rex or even solo ranked. Obviously some games can be pretty good, but most of the time in bad matches it's going to be really not fun. So my heart definitely goes out to you guys. I hope this expansion is not too rough on you. Now we'll cover some useful information to know. I may have covered some of these, but we'll just get into it real quick. If you're bad at getting Toxic Haze into Lethal Strike off, just remember Corrosive Grenade will slow the target, and if they purged it, you can just reapply it again for the slow. You can also stun, so this helps typically running in the direction they're most likely to run to. This is sort of just a mind reading skill, and you have to figure this up as a melee anyway, so just do keep that in mind. So let's say, for example, my enemy team's back here, right? They want to run there, and if they don't run there, if they run here to my team, they're going to get screwed. So they're pretty much always going to go. So if you can push a little bit further and cut them off, they pretty much have to walk through it. So if you can always just find a way to area deny, if you're Toxic Haze, you can basically pretty much always get Lethal Strike off. This does mean you're probably stuttering a little bit, but if people are clumped, it's usually not a problem. And I previously described how it works, so do keep that in mind. Again, Lethal Haze's radius isn't actually that big, so if you're using it, you'll want to make sure that the group is close to your target when using it. You can AoE even outside of the haze if your main target was in the haze, which is pretty cool, not too practical. Basically, that's a quick summarize of what I explained earlier. This also means for those playing versus it, running to the edge is completely fine to completely ruin their AoE haze. You do not have to fully get out of it, just far enough away from the operative and basically their main target. So if you know that you're the main target, just make sure you just walk a little bit away from everybody else, and bam, their lethal haze is no longer deadly. Unless, they're just trying to kill the tank. And by that means, if you're a tank, just walk a little bit further away, so you take a little bit less. Anytime you see a lightning sorcerer, basically, be careful. If it's Stormwatch, save evasion for Stormwatch when they apply it to. If they're running elemental convection, just get them away. Use chain lightning. Or chain lightning desync, not use chain lightning. Chain lightning desync will make it nearly impossible for you to hit them with anything other than a range attack. You will roll and go nowhere due to chain lightning desyncing you back. Roots are what will get you killed, and it's basically what I'm trying to get at. Anytime you notice there's a lot of roots, be aware defensively and keep probes up. It's not always a good idea to pop evasion just to get out of the roots. And getting into cleanses real quick, we'll go over that. We have, was it Toxin Scan? Yep, and it can be reset by, so it cleanses 2 negative tech or physical effects. So go to Tactical Overdrive real quick. So this will reset your cleanse if you're a healer. Apparently it doesn't do it as a DPS, which is fine. But it is something nice to know as a healer. Basically, you have this. I'm pretty sure it did as a DPS. I wonder. I feel like they did. Did they really change that? I don't know. I'm actually curious on that. I want to say that they didn't, but that would actually be an interesting change. We'll find out real quick. I think I probably have a blaster rifle, maybe, if I'm lucky. And then we can just figure it out real quick. Let's just use the replica. So I deleted most of my other ones. Alright, so do that, and then, okay, so yeah, for DPS it won't reset, which is okay, I guess. But it's better to know than not know, so hopefully that helps if you're a healer. Anyway, so what you should be cleansing as a DPS, Lethality Operative, or even like Concealment. Anytime you're trying to kill a sniper, you want to be looking at your team and seeing who can't get out sniper knockback route and cleanse it for them. This will make it a lot easier for yourself too, as your damage is mostly dots, and anybody else is probably burst damage, so burst damage is going to be a little bit more effective at killing them faster. You can also use evasion to get out of this too, or just self-cleanse it to get out of it. But usually if someone else cannot get out of it, and you're not the target, get them with cleanse. Your damage is good, right? But it's not that bursty. So getting somebody else out of it will be a priority. And they will also pretty much always roll out of your toxic haze anyway, so definitely prioritize somebody else over yourself with the cleanse for knockback route. You can also cleanse all of these: Low Slash, Ravage Root, Flashbang, Crippling Slice, Electro Dart, Flaming Fist, Rocket Punch, the Stun and Root version. While you won't cleanse most of these, sometimes it's nice to be able to get Electrocute Cleanse. This is usually something that can save somebody or help them survive. I understand for most this is really hard to pay attention to, but when you know it's coming, just try to look for it. A lot of DPS don't use their cleanse, and it's honestly a game changer most of the time. Sadly, cleanse sometimes it will not get what you wanted it to, so do keep that in mind in high debuff amount of games, or high debuff amount games. So whenever somebody's applying a lot of debuffs like trauma and stuff like that, chances are you might end up cleansing the other effects and not the CC itself. That's usually sometimes a duration thing. Then to pretty much to explain what defenses to avoid and how to play accordingly to each spec or class. Lightning with elemental convection will make it impossible to move, so never push them alone. You're much better at off-healing, single targeting, or cleaving other players. Let a burst DPS deal with it, even support them when they go after them if you really need to take them out. You will also basically lose a lot of pressure and do little damage alone if the sorcerer is still awake at the keyboard. So remember, just try not to go at them alone unless it's literally like a 1v1. Or it doesn't really matter, like your team impact because you're probably already winning anyway, so you can just basically use yourself as a distraction. Sometimes that can work. Stormwatch is much less threatening. You just don't use roll one when they're casting Thundering Blast. So basically after Thundering Blast, they pretty much always use a Chain Lightning afterwards, which will be a root. So let the Thundering Blast hit you, probably like probe or do something to mitigate it. And then after Chain Lightning has happened, you can then roll and it won't desync you. Moving to Madness. Madness isn't that scary. If Deathbrand keeps reproccing, I do recommend line of sighting, as this ability slows you like crazy, although doing decent damage. If it keeps triggering over and over, it'll definitely get you killed. And if you don't respect it, other than that, if you basically just pay attention to purging their dots because you can with evasion, and also having 30% dot DR, you're not in much danger against this class, or as this spec. And then we go into Rage and Venge. These are your favorite things to hit and or fight. Rage has very little DR, meaning you will hit them hard all the time. If they don't have Saber Ward, this is your #1 target to be doing your rotation on, as for Venge, you will want to purge dots if they try to spread them off of you, and send them anytime they get slams going. It's very important to not let them cleave you and your team. There's nothing really too crazy to look out for them. Whenever they glow with red or blue sparks, that means that they're reflecting. That's like mainly the thing to look out for. Other than that, they are a great target and not too scary. They do have a lot of CC. Well, I mean, kinda. Especially like in roots, push, and choke. So just keep that in mind. And then moving on to AP and Pyro. While Pyro isn't very dangerous for you, you're not too dangerous for them either. Try not to do your rotation on them, but they are great. A great target for spreading. And just like the way that they'll play is pretty much the same way that you'll play. They want to be in cleave, you kind of want to be in cleave too. So it does make them a great target for dot spreading. Just remember, if they pop shield, they will basically be CC immune for the first few seconds of a shield. And the only thing to look out for is Flaming Fist root. Roots will get you killed, so just do keep in mind that. You can cleanse that and roll away if you need to. Searing Wave slow is pretty impactful, and slows do affect the distance that you'll travel with root, so it's another thing to keep in mind. And as they're taking damage, they get cooldown reduction for their Carbonize. That's another thing to also consider if you're thinking about, throwing your corrosive assaults in them, which you shouldn't because they're relatively tanky against your damage, but they're good to spread off of. Now for AP, this is one of the deadliest things in-game currently, and all your DR is barely enough to survive. If you need to, just stealth out and make them basically target reset, as you won't be able to take all of their burst most of the time. Sadly, with Taunt Stun, you can't really do anything to stop it as it's off the level cooldown. Would likely recommend trying to kite them and abuse your slow, stun them on the hydraulics only. Also on Pyro. Shield gives them CC immunity for the first half, so just do try to keep that in mind. So you just CC for the first half, just like Saber Ward for Marauder. Then moving on to Marksman. Virulence Engineering, you won't have much issue with these, along with not seeing them too often. But evasion completely shuts down marksman from doing anything. Roll ambush hurts really bad, even with DRR up, and so does penetrating rounds, excuse me. If they're any good, abuse the ability to line of sight and off-heal, as they'll pretty much never outlast you. Virulence will want to apply all 3 dots to you. Basically, you just purge it after the 3rd dot is applied or about to be applied. Now for engineering, its biggest burst is going to be tied to a dot that they apply. It can only be applied to one person. You can hit Absorb to help tank it, or just pop evasion to stop it from happening in the first place. So overall, not too crazy. Just do be aware if they can get you in a root and then follow you into a stun. It is sometimes a vulnerable situation to be in unless you have DR rolling. Then going into Marauder, we have Carnage, Annihilation, and Fury. Really, only Fury is a threat, but they won't hit you too hard if you have DR available. The best thing you can do is avoiding Force Crush from critting you, or at least critting on you while they have Furious Strike, which is currently its main burst. If any Marauder is good, you'll want to Evasion Force Crush, as they'll follow another ability with Berserk to auto-crit both Force Crush and the next ability, which would usually be Furious Strike. You can also slow them in predation with Corrosive Grenade to make them less obnoxious, but Defel in general will just be annoying. Annihilation is really only going to hurt when they have Force Rend and Berserk up together. So, like others, just purge its dots. Carnage is really only going to be doing damage because it's Swiftness mod, and it isn't too hard to make it fall off of them. If they're hitting you for some weird reason, stun them to stall out their Swiftness passive, then evasion out of it when their stun's over. They'll have to restack Swiftness, and generally will be even less of a threat when they're not much of a threat in the first place. So you pretty much don't have to worry about them too much, but Gore will prevent you from using hypermobility and stealth out. So do keep in mind when they can spam Gore on you, you are in a vulnerable situation, but just try to keep in mind that evasion stops them from doing anything. So if you're in a bad situation, there's Carnage around and it's going to try to get you with Gore, just save evasion for it, and bam, you're no longer going to get hindered anymore because evasion. But to keep in mind, evasion doesn't work when you're stunned, so if you're stunned, it's probably more dire than dealing with Gore. Then we have Arsenal and IO. IO will do good damage when its supercharged gas is up, though you don't really see it that often. You can evasion when you get thermal on you to mess up their mag shot that will follow it. That is the scary part, along with thermal into mech shot, which is white damage to explode thermal. Arsenal can hit really hard, but it's relying on white damage, so rolling around for the 30% defense chance and evasion really makes it hard for the class to do much damage to you. That is a scary window, along with them having gas up for raw shot auto crit, along with the 4x stack of their Burning Bright Tactical, which is the purple buff icon on their tray. This allows their priming shot to hit 100 case. However, if they use it and the target doesn't have the Tracer debuff on them, it will always do less damage, way less. So you can evasion just before you think they'll use it on you and save yourself a lot of damage that you would have taken. You won't see Arsenal too much, and again, they'll probably try to CC you to make sure that they can land that ability. As missing that basically makes their damage non-existent. And going into basically the last two, Hatred and Deception. Typically, Deception will only be a threat. Hatred will hurt its opener, but falls off pretty hard afterwards. Rolling away and slowing them will make it really hard for them to do any consistent damage, as most of their options force them to give up mobility. The same goes for Deception too, but they have more CC. Deception's opener is a lot of white damage, so evasion is very good to use, as it's only a 6-second window of 100% crit for them. Do keep in mind that evasion will not work if you're stunned, so do think about your white bar when this is happening, and pop your DR first. They can, however, play very aggressively and use a combat reset to then reset their next window of 100% credit for 6 seconds. This does force them to basically give up one of their defensives, and most Sins will probably get away with it in some situations if their team is able to just spam DPS and win the game. So there are some situations that you will actually have to worry about this, and just be safe rather than be sorry. Just never rock to pop your Zorb and Stim Boost if you know that they're going to hit you or if you think that they're going to hit you. It's better to not die than die, basically. Usually it's not very easy to kill a Lethality Operative if you play it well, or at least are aware of what's going on and not wasting pretty much everything that you have. Like, I know a lot of people will pop Aviation and Zorb together. That's completely pointless. Don't do that. Stim Boost is very strong, and anytime that you take damage, you should try to make sure that you use a Zorb or Stim Boost. Stim Boost is just really good to have up whenever you're not max health and to give you more alacrity, so you have lower cooldown on your hard stun, lower cooldown on pretty much everything else that you have. So going into target list. So usually we want guarded target. We want to hit the guarded target, right? If a lot of DCDs are up on the person with guard, don't hit them. Then your number one target outside of that will be Rage and Vengeance. These guys only have 5% defense chance, just like us, and they just make a really good target in general to hit. Since they don't have that much DR available, it means you're hitting them hard all the time, and they don't really have a way to purge your stuff, so you can basically free spread off them all the time. Then IO and Arsenal, pretty much for the same reason. These classes will likely not prevent you from spreading off of them and are great targets for doing your rotational. Anything else is suboptimal, and you will likely miss frequently on them, or they will do something to prevent your spreads. DCDs to avoid. Saber Ward, it's 12 seconds, 2 seconds of 100% defense chance. IO's Chaff Flare, which is 6 seconds, I think. Shield and Power Yield, that's way too tanky to hit into. Power Yield, way too tanky to hit into. Pyro Colto, way too tanky to hit into, but if there's nobody to hit, again, do remember, just hit into it. Then we have Menace DR talent. It's crazy tanky nowadays and perma uptime. Still decent to hit though, because it is still a sorcerer, and overall pressuring them rather than letting them free cast is a little bit more important. And since you're multi-hit class, basically, the damage reduction is still effective, but not crazy effective. Then we have Madness DR talent plus suppression. This is definitely something you want to look out for. You'll do significantly less damage, making them your main target. Your dots obviously will do less damage on them, but if you can just not hit into that, if you have a choice, don't do it. Again, suppression's only 6 seconds, so it's not a very long time. Lightning with full DR stacks, basically just CC them. If they're not great or greedy, they'll let their DR fall, so then they'll become a good target once again. So just look at their DR stacks. Unfortunately, I don't remember exactly what it looks like, but I'll try to add in the video what it is. Then pretty much everything else just stops damage or should be obvious to avoid. But there are some ones that aren't too obvious. That you should find or have another target. I completely butchered that, sorry. Most of them are obvious, is what I meant to say, right? And you obviously will just avoid them. And when you know one of these DCDs are coming up, you should be looking at what's your next target. It shouldn't always just be on one target. So you should always in mind as DPS, it's like, say I'm hitting this person, I know he's going to pop shield soon, and maybe like Power Yield or something. I want to be looking at the other people and analyzing like, hey, that person over there is a Mana Sorcerer. Let's see if he's got the DR talent. Let's go to him. Because hitting into shield plus Power Yield is completely pointless. So we'll go over to hit him, right? And we'll see that he doesn't have the Madness DR. Then he becomes like our number one priority for most of the game to hit, because it's a lot of free damage that's hitting him. And then going into closing notes, as this has gone on for literally an hour now, this class is incredibly easy to play. It was last expansion. I had set out to prove that pretty much how silly busted it was in Season 12. This still remains true. This class is basically it has to pick and choose nothing. So when the pruning happened, this class overall didn't really change. We do have to give up Polish Reverse or AoE stealth, which is not always super useful. Flashbang, you get the talent with it, so the accuracy debuff, which is both for yellow and white damage, is combined into it, which is pretty obnoxious, not gonna lie. Or Polish Reverse. In Regs, I always love this. The Flashbang is definitely mandatory in the arena. So we didn't really have to pick and choose much of anything, and we also gained DR and just basically free damage overall. And we also increased our duration of our stim boost, which is just absolutely crazy. Like the self-healing on this class was already good last expansion. Now it's even better. I've done 15 to 20k HPS in some of the arenas that I've already played, which is super cool. Balance-wise, that's not super cool. That's broken, I would say. Obviously, those are pretty short games, and those are games where they've tried to tunnel me, but obviously completely failed, and I healed through all of it. And I also off-healed a little bit. And overall, just take your time to basically truly understand your kit and abuse it, as it certainly is busted. It's completely fine. Like, even though I do say it's easy, you still have to have some game knowledge, so don't feel demotivated if you do poor on the class. If you guys have any questions or more detailed questions that I didn't cover here, feel free to ask. Also, if you're wanting to get better at this spec and have footage I can review, I would be happy to do so either publicly or privately. It's up to you. I enjoy analyzing games, and it makes it far easier to help with what you may not know that is likely assumed that you already do know. This would also help getting information out in general about how to deal with certain situations or topics I may have just brushed over, as I felt they were common sense or I just simply forgot. This also includes pretty much any spec. I'm not too experienced in healer, so probably don't ask me for that. Tanking I could probably help you a little bit with. Not too interested in it though, but for most DPS specs I could probably help you a good bit. And then obviously I've helped somebody before with this. I did have a redemption, again, as I said in my previous stream. I kept that completely privately. I enjoy analyzing stuff like that, and I haven't really had the opportunity to do that, so I'm more than happy. If you guys want that, definitely do it. But other than that, I appreciate you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And remember, if you guys have anything to say or say like, man, this video was really long, what are you doing? Can you make it a little bit more concise? Please do give me feedback. I did it this way just because it was easier for me and I wanted to get videos out a little bit sooner so I could spread the information rather than spend 2-3 weeks editing, because it took me a little over a week. It took me like 12 days of editing just to get the last video out that I did. That was 40 minutes. That was a pain. I really don't want to do that again. So apologies for the video quality, as it won't be as high grade as my other guides. I wanted to just basically just get the information out here, as I'm not that great at video editing and it takes so long for me to go through all that. But again, other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate you guys for watching.